from the All Indiana Podcast Network.
It's time for real conversation about the real issues that affect our communities.
Poverty, education, equality, and more.
This is Real Talk.
Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Welcome to Real Talk on the All Indiana Podcast Network. I am Reverend Charles Harrison, and on this episode, we will be talking to William Casey. He is a former police officer for the Anderson Police Department. He is now a community leader and an advocate for peace. And we will be talking today about the recent surge in violence in the city of Anderson, Indiana. Welcome to Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison. I am the senior pastor of Barnes United Methodist Church in Indianapolis, and I'm also the president of the board of directors of the Indianapolis 10-Point Coalition. And I would like to welcome you today to this podcast, and we have a very special guest with us today from Anderson, Indiana, William Casey, who is a former Anderson police officer. He retired after 34 years of service, retired as a sergeant, and we're so happy to have him join us today. As today we talk a little bit about the surge in violence in Anderson, Indiana. Welcome, William. Welcome to the show today.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Rev. I appreciate it.
Well, it is an honor to have you on the show, and we have talked a lot on the telephone over the last few years. And just for the listeners who are listening today on this podcast, can you tell us a little bit about yourself before we kind of get into the discussion? I know you served as a police officer in Anderson for 34 years. Kind of tell the listener a little bit about yourself.
I'm originally from Detroit. Church of God minister got me to Anderson, Indiana. Graduated from Anderson University. Got with the police department, and I lived in the hood most of my career. So I'm kind of connected to the community and in so many areas. Know a lot of people, and I believe that my job was to serve the community as well as protect the community.
Well, Anderson has been in the news lately, and I know off and on for the last couple of years about, the violence in the city. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of what's going on in Anderson? Most people from Central Indiana certainly hear about a lot of the violence in Annapolis, but yet there are cities like Anderson and Muncie that has also in recent years seen some level of violence in their cities.
Well, Anderson is a great place to live, and I know that these two recent incidents that happened kind of put a bad blemish on Anderson. It's a factory town. It's rebounding back with technology, manufacturing, things like that. But the community is really solid. The recent incidents that happened, we had several organizations and grassroots organizations come together to make a united front to say no to violence, and we had some folks from Indianapolis from 10-Point Coalition come up to get that spark started. And I think that they are doing other programs to address some of the issues in Anderson dealing with gun violence. I would say that there's always been this problem with I have to say something about street gang violence. Some of the stuff grew from that with young people. And that's been some of the problems in Anderson and also as well as Muncie. We just have to take our communities back.
So what's driving the street violence and the gang violence? What's going on different today than maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Or is there anything different as far as what's kind of driving it?
Rev, to be honest with you, you have these kids. They are kind of like unsupervised, so they take advantage of the moment. Some of the kids we dealt with back in 2013 were like 13, 14-year-olds with guns shooting at each other in broad daylight. It's just broad daylight, just brazen about what they were doing. And I think that the community somehow has fallen apart. We don't have the accountability of the community. We need to have crime watch groups. We need to be a part of that system. And I think some of that leadership might have, I would say, let's say they don't have the apprentices coming up. So we need more young people to step up to be leaders too. And I think that's a lot of the problems that happen when you have, the problem with there's no jobs. Back then, you still feel the effects of that. And you have the epidemic with meth and heroin, opiates and stuff like that. And, COVID comes in, so now communities are not as tight like they used to be. And they're making a comeback. But I think those are some of the factors. And the main thing is accountability, and people have to get more active in what's going on, not just saying the police need to do this, police need to do that. But you also have to take back your community, because a lot of people know who did what. They just got to come forward.
So when you talk about accountability, are you talking accountability from the law enforcement perspective, or the community perspective, parents? When you talk about accountability, for you, what does that look like?
It's all the things you mentioned, especially starting with the parents.
Okay.
That's where a lot of things happen at the home. I used to work at the juvenile center, and a lot of time we have a kid, he become a model resident, but we know he goes back to the home life and environment, he's going to get caught right back up in what he got into. So we got to have that. We got to have, as far as our politicians, be held accountable by people in the community. And the police department don't even do so much. Now, I know about Anderson Police Department, there's a big transition going on. Chief Lee is doing a great job in trying to, get these new people to get more acclimated to the Anderson community. So that's the problem I know in Anderson as far as the police department. Since I left, they might have hired maybe, since 2015, they might have hired maybe 50 people, maybe. And, a lot of them are disconnected, because most departments around the state, most officers do not live where they work at.
So in Anderson, does the officers live in the city, or are they really connected to the areas of the city that is seeing the violence, and is that an issue? I know in Indianapolis, part of the concern that leaders have and residents have is that the makeup of the officers who tend to patrol these hotspot areas, or areas that see a lot of crime and violence, tend not to look like the people in the area that they are patrolling. And there are some concerns and issues around that issue. Maybe not having the kind of relationships that some say in Indianapolis they used to have. I'm not from Indy. I'm from Southern Indiana, so I'm learning a lot since I've been here. So in
Right.
Anderson, is that the case too, with police? Or they're not from the city, or are they from the city, and do they have the kind of relationships with the residents and young people that are needed?
I would say from the outside looking in, I can't really speak for the police department, but for myself and what I've been seeing in the newspaper, they have hired a lot of people from the outside community. So I know it's probably they're going through that process, and they're working on that process very diligently. They got a lot of programs that will help some of these young officers get connected to the community through the police department, and they're pushing that. But all that stuff takes time.
Yeah,
it takes time.
So what, William? What do you see as some of the things that you would like to see done? And I know we have talked about the possibility of initiating some form of a 10-point model in Anderson. I know I've talked to some other leaders that are talking about some youth-driven initiatives to really try to reach the most at-risk youth, or those who tend to gravitate, toward violence, in the city. So what do you see as things that the city can do that you think would be effective in helping to address the root causes of the violence and stop the immediate violence that the city has experienced?
Well, the city got so many resources. We have, different places where kids do things, and in those hours where activities are happening, I think that there needs to be more programs dealing with addressing stuff like mental health, conflict resolution, anger control, things of that nature. more so than just recreation, but a part of recreation. And you got to have the right people in there doing that kind of stuff. And the thing I want to say is that, Anderson is doing the best that it can. It can do more, but I think that with the community leaders doing their job, as far as I want to say this word, politics, they get the politics out. And you and I both know that. We tried to get the 10 Coalition a few years back in Anderson, and I was kind of upset about that at the time because the chief of police wasn't even there at the time. Not Mike Lee, another chief.
Right.
And it's because I knew they had to deal with politics. And, but those politics shouldn't dictate the problem areas. The people have to come out in those areas and stand for themselves and represent themselves and force some of these leaders who are not really representing them to represent them. We have to go back to what we used to do when you know who your councilman is in your area. If there's something going on, you go through the whole process. The city don't come through, then you go through that council person. Hey, look, I'm coming to the next councilman. I bring a bunch of people with me. So you're going to address this issue one way or another because I'm the one that's living here and suffering. We got to get that back. We got to get back that mentality of ownership and being accountable for our own communities.
What is the role of the faith community in this issue? Is this the issue that the faith community feels like it needs to get involved with, or has it reached that level yet where there are discussions with clergy, particularly, and churches, the need for them to be more active in trying to address the violence and its root causes?
Those things are in the making. Just to let you know, I am a believer.
Okay.
But I'm more of a reader too, as far as getting things. And I think that we have a disconnection, and I'm going to talk about the black community, the black church.
Okay.
In our black churches, there's a big age gap, a huge age gap as far as some of these churches have so many older people in them that there's no young people. So they're not really connected to what's really going on nowadays in the world. I'm just being honest about that.
Okay.
And we need to somehow get them to be our leaders, those young people. And I don't know. It's just, but Anderson, they're working on it. There's a couple of groups. You got J.R. Martin with his group. You have Larry McClendon with a grassroots organization called the Redwood Foundation. And you got Tim Townsend with the Housing Authority. So they have been coming together, and they're going to make some things happen. Because, we got some things coming up in Anderson. We got the chapter of the Anderson Black Expo having their festival. Then we have the Soul Fest, which is following the following weekend of that having their festival, which is the end of July and the beginning of August. So there are concerns about safety concerns about, how are you going to have security? How are you going to make sure it's safe for the people, not just at the festivals, but after the aftersets?
So what are some of the things that the groups that you name and individuals are doing that you think have been effective, in reaching young people? Well,
I know they have been at the site where the last incident happened at 16th Madison, talking with people, reaching out to people, and trying to get them to some of their programs. And I think that's a start. It's a start. It's not something that's going to sleep. It's not something that people are forgetting about. With the Kira McCullough incident and this one with Landon Hill, they're not forgetting. They're not letting the community forget. So they are moving forward with programs to address a lot of the problems, which I'm very happy to see it because I was there. Each time somebody was somewhere, I was there and talking with people and hearing their plans. So I'm going to make sure that these plans go forward. I'm pushing to make sure that does happen, not just be talking about what they're going to do, but make it happen, make it a reality.
Well, I am excited that William, that we're having conversations, with 10 Point, with you and other leaders in Anderson, and I think we're gonna, a few of us from Indianapolis, from 10 Point, I think we're gonna be involved in the expo event there in Anderson. So I'm kind of looking forward to that and look forward to our conversation because I know we are planning to meet soon. And I think my schedule next week is a lot better than it has been this week. So I'm looking forward to that, and particularly meeting and eating.
I'm going to take care of you.
All right. I look forward to it. Well, William, I will be back in touch with you, and we want to bring you back on the podcast to continue our conversation about the violence in Anderson and what the community is doing to address that issue and other issues that the city is facing when it comes to young people. So I just want to thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me, Reverend.
All right. Well, talk to you, and you be blessed.
All right, you too. God bless you now.
Uh-huh. Welcome back to Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison. And I just want to thank again William Casey from Anderson, former Anderson police officer, for joining us in the first portion of our show. I want to talk about Indianapolis right now. And for those of you who are listening, you know that I have been working in this city for almost 24 years. It's 23 and a half years. I have been involved with the Indianapolis 10-Point Coalition. I'm a local pastor on the west side of Indianapolis, and Barnes United Methodist Church, where I'm the senior pastor of that congregation, joined other churches in trying to address the surging violence that we happened to experience in 1998. And in 1999, we kicked off 10-Point, a part of the city's larger strategy in reducing the level of violence. And I think in the first year, we saw a dramatic decline from 1998 to 1999, and particularly in the 6 or 7 areas that 10-Point patrol, in partnership with lots of community groups, other faith-based groups, the city and law enforcement, we were able to see a 40% reduction. Well, the talk right now in the city of Indianapolis is, from probably about 1999 to about 2012, Indianapolis, on the average, probably experienced less than 100 criminal homicides or murders a year. Under several different mayors, we were able to basically continue at that time, which was the Boston ceasefire model, which was a collaborative approach to addressing violence, partnerships with city, the courts, the prosecutor's office. At that time, the sheriff's office was patrolling certain parts of the city of Indianapolis, and then IPD at that time. And we saw a lot of success, that collaborative partnership, partnering with a lot of grassroots organizations, churches, community centers. We saw a pretty good level of success in probably maintaining a city that on the average 100 or less murders. Well, certainly over the last 8 years, since about 2015, Indianapolis has seen the highest level of violence. And certainly it's been a great concern of the city, our city officials, the residents of Indianapolis, and you can even say law enforcement and the court system. I think everybody's really been concerned as to what we have witnessed over the last 8 years. And we have seen record-breaking levels of not just homicides, but certainly of shootings and stabbings in the city. And a lot of people are concerned. They're really concerned. But the question that a lot of people are asking today is, has there been a reduction in the level of violence in 2022 compared to 2021, and what do people really feel? What is the feel and the sense in the larger community? And I think, my wife, this morning as we were talking about the level of violence in the city of Indianapolis, said to me that when you wake up every morning and you turn on the news and you continue to see the leading story of people being shot or someone being killed, that you get the sense that things are not better. And my wife said, in the work that she does as a caseworker and dealing with people who talk often about the violence, is that people don't really feel safe, even though this year the non-fatal shootings are down. Last year at this time, we had about 368 non-fatal shootings in the city. This year we're at 339 non-fatal shootings in the city. So you're looking at about a 29 non-fatal shooting difference from last year to this year. So this year we have had about 29 less non-fatal shootings than last year in 2021. When it comes to homicides, last year at this point, Indianapolis was at 127 homicides. That was the number this time last year, the 1st of July. This year, we're at 114 homicides, which is down from last year, 13 homicides, but it's up from 2020, which was the first year in the history of Indianapolis that the city had eclipsed 200 homicides. For the first time, in the history of the city of Indianapolis, we went over 200 homicides. And the question that is being posed and raised, is things really getting any better in the city? And I think my wife's comments probably reflect what I hear most in the city, even though when you look at the numbers are down, particularly in homicides, which most people really measure the safety of a city and shootings. Those numbers are down this year, but it doesn't feel like it's better. It doesn't feel like it's safer. And I think that's the feeling that most people still have when you wake up in the morning and the leading stories on the local news is about shootings or someone or multiple people being killed. Sometimes when you go to bed and you watch the 10 o'clock news or the 11 o'clock news and they're reporting on another shooting or homicide, when you have children in a bouncy house at an event on the 4th of July, that bouncy house is shot up and two people children are shot, that disturbs you. And then you have a 12-year-old who is out watching the fireworks with his family and a stray bullet shoots him and he is injured. That really messes with your psyche and as you begin to think in terms of, is the city really any safer? And I think a lot of people would say no. I do think the city is doing a lot of good things. I think the investment that the city of Indianapolis has made in trying to address this issue of violence must be commended and applauded for that. There have probably been, in the last 7-8 years, it looks like 50 or 60 new groups in the city, individuals who are so concerned about the violence that they have come together to try to help address it. But yet, even with these additional groups being involved in violence reduction, when you look at what's going on in the city, you still become concerned that the level of violence in the city of Indianapolis is still much too high for what it has historically been in this city, and you become concerned. And the concern is, are we really being effective from a law enforcement perspective, from the city's perspective, and from the grassroots community and the faith-based community in reducing the level of violence, and what are the challenges that we're facing. And I tell a lot of people who ask me, I think there are different challenges today. When I started doing this 23 years ago, you did not have as easy access to unlawful weapons in the hands of really teenagers and felons. And I have seen over the 23 years just a dramatic increase in the level of unlawful guns on the streets. There seems to be a proliferation of it. And I think one of the things that certainly concerns me, and how do we address this issue, I'm not certain, but certainly we have seen a dramatic increase in unlawful guns on the streets in the hands of both felons and teenagers. With this caveat too, I think what really I have witnessed is this dramatic decline in what I believe is the moral fabric of America and in our cities today, where there does not seem to be a code on the street anymore. When I was younger, back in the 70s and 80s, there was a code on the street. And even though you may have been involved in some level of violence, innocent people and other family members were not the target of any violence. If you were trying to shoot someone, to injure them, or even if you tried to kill them, you would always get them by themselves. You would not find them at a family gathering, and because they're there and you know they're there, then you're going to shoot up the family gathering. That just did not happen. There was a line in the sand that was drawn that people back in the 70s and 80s, and I would contend even most of the 90s, did not cross. Well, today that line is being crossed, and there doesn't seem to be any regard for the sanctity of human life, and that's really troubling. If we're trying to reduce the level of violence, and you have family members who get into an argument at a family event that leads to one family member killing another family member, then we have a larger societal problem that we have to address. Now, I know that many out there believe that we have to put a greater focus on the issue of mental health, and I will not deny that, nor will I debate those who are in the medical profession about the issue of mental health in this country, because I do believe that that is a real issue. It is significant. I do think that a lot of the mental health that we are seeing people experience today in many of these areas that see high levels of violence has also been drug induced. As more and more people use drugs and alcohol, I believe that we have seen a greater level of people who are suffering from mental health. As a minister, I would take it even further. I certainly believe that you cannot deny the spiritual component of this that is certainly being ignored today in our society when we talk about this void in human beings, and particularly males. I'm really concerned about males who are in their teens and in their 20s. And when you look at nationally the mass shootings that we're seeing in cities all across the country, they tend to be white males. When you look at the inner city violence and drive-by shootings and a lot of these shootings that are taking place, it tends to be young men of color that is involved in that. And I just feel like that there is this spiritual void in young men today that's not being filled by positive things, but by negative things. And they tend to be the individuals that lack this moral compass. Not all young men, because I believe that there's a segment of the population that is really engaged in this violence that we're seeing, not just in Annapolis, but certainly in cities all across the country, in America today. But certainly there is something going on in our country that I believe has to be a larger societal discussion about what's driving the violence among these young men. Because I don't believe cities and police can fix this problem without the support of the larger community, and we must address some of these cultural and societal issues that I believe is driving the level of violence that we are seeing in Annapolis. And the other thing I believe that if these numbers are going to come down, and right now, when you look at the numbers in 2022, if the numbers don't change that much, the city is now on a pace for the second highest number of homicide shootings and stabbings in the history of the city. It would be the third consecutive year in 2022 that Annapolis has seen over 200 homicides, and this is an issue that we certainly have to address as a city, and I would like to see the city do more. I do applaud you for what you are doing with a lot of these community and grassroots organizations that are trying to reach our most at-risk youth, and I believe that is a good thing. But there has to also be a focus on how do we stop the bleeding of the violence, and how do we reach the individuals who are most likely to be the shooter or the stabber or the person that pulls the trigger and leads to the next homicide. We have to put a greater focus on initiatives in partnership with the city and law enforcement and the courts and our prosecutor to not only arrest these individuals who are engaged in this kind of violence, but make sure that they are being held accountable. I would say to the prosecutor, we cannot continue, and I know you are a very compassionate person, and you believe in many of the injustices that communities of color have experienced, but you cannot go too far on the reform side that you neglect the public safety side, because if we are releasing individuals back into the neighborhood who have not been held accountable, who still have an issue with their moral compass where there is no regard for the sanctity of human life, and they're still going to choose violence over nonviolent ways to address their conflicts, then communities of color are suffering the brunt of the violence in the city. And that system or process that has been put in place is not fair and just to us. I believe in justice when it comes to the judicial system. But if you keep getting arrested for being a violent offender over and over and over again, then there's something wrong, and we need to take a look at the judicial system or whether or not it's broken or not, so that we won't have repeat violent offenders getting back out on the street and committing another shooting or committing another hideous homicide in the city. That does not benefit Black America. It doesn't. It doesn't benefit other communities of faith. It doesn't benefit us to put a repeat violent, felon on home detention on the ankle bracelet with the GPS monitoring system if he's still going to sell drugs from his house, if he's still in possession of guns, if he puts aluminum foil around his ankle bracelet and goes down the street around the corner and still involved in criminal activity, and he's either the suspect or the victim of the next violent crime, that does not help the Black community. And I say, from a clergy person in this city, an anti-violence advocate, that we have to have a judicial system that is fair and equitable. I agree with that, but it also cannot go so far in that direction that we don't hold those responsible for committing acts of violence accountable. Because if the prosecutor's office and the courts are not going to hold them accountable, then the streets will. And that's where you come and see a lot of street justice, or what we call retaliations, because if that person is perceived as getting away with committing acts of violence, then those who he committed acts of violence against are friends of those who he committed or she committed an act of violence against, will take justice into their own hands. And when we began to talk about what's happening in Indianapolis, I don't think that the judicial system is caught up with the initiatives that are being put in place to address the violence. If we don't fix the broken judicial system, then the efforts of a lot of wonderful groups on the street are going to go in vain, and we're still going to see a high level of violence in this city that we should not be seeing if we're going to do the right things and hold people accountable. So I believe that if we're going to change the trajectory of these numbers, and I don't feel like most people feel like the city is safer, even though there has been 29 less shootings this year than last year and 13 less homicides this year than last year. People don't feel safe. They don't feel like there's been less shootings. They don't feel like there have been less homicides, and we have to change that perception. The third thing I would say is that we have to, I believe, go back to proven strategies that can help mitigate the level of violence that we are seeing in our city, and creating stronger city law enforcement and court partnerships with faith-based groups and anti-violence groups and grassroots organizations in our neighborhood. This is key in Annapolis. It's only going to get worse unless we create these collaborative partnerships that allows communities and neighborhoods to take a leading role in the strategies in their particular part of the city to help reduce the level of violence that we are seeing in our city. We can do this in Annapolis, but we must look at different approaches to how we lower the level of homicide, shootings, and stabbings in this city. And we have to be open to not just new ideas, but old ideas that were successful in the past, and I believe that will still work today in our city to certainly help lower the level of violence that we are seeing. So, I just wanted to take time out in this podcast because I'm supportive of what I see going on in the city, but I believe that there's more that we must do if we're going to lower the level of violence. And if we can keep the politics out of it and embrace everyone to be a part of the solution and helping to lower the level of violence in this city, if we are ensuring that resources are poured into the right initiatives that will help lower the temperature on the street and reduce the number of shootings and stabbings and violent incidences, then I believe in Annapolis we can significantly start seeing reductions in the overall violence. And if you start there, where individuals, when they wake up in the morning, every morning, the leading story is not that 6 people got shot in 90 minutes. That's what the problem is now, is that's what we're seeing when we turn on the local news. And that has to change. And it makes people feel uneasy, or people who are living in neighborhoods where they hear constant gunfire night after night in this city. Well, those people don't feel safer. And those families that are experiencing and enduring a lot of violence. So no, I don't believe that the perception is that violence is better. And I think we have to do a lot more. Even if we end 2022 with lower non-fatal shooting numbers and lower homicide numbers, unless they are dramatic and people begin to see it and feel it on the streets, the perception is that Indianapolis will continually be a city that is experiencing record and surging breaking violence in the city. People are going to have to see and feel that things are getting better before we really change the mindset and the attitudes of residents in the city of Indianapolis. This has been Reverend Charles Harrison with Real Talk on the All Indiana Broadcast Network. Thank you so much for joining me today, because I will bring you more real talk about the real issues that affect our communities here in Indianapolis and around central Indiana and the country. Be sure to follow and subscribe to this podcast and share it on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you again for joining me today. This is Reverend Charles Harrison, and I pray that you have a blessed and wonderful day.
This is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast.
And be sure to check out other great podcasts on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Online now at allindianapodcast.com.